You know, a lot of guys would talk about how they couldn't sleep when they went to the field, and I'd tell them, I said, well, I never had any of that problem. You know, I slept like a baby, but that was because I slept right beside Artis. Now I got woke up several times in the middle of the night, but it was never by Artis. It was by the GI he had just bit because he walked too close to me. So I was pretty confident, you know. I knew nobody was going to sneak up on me, yeah. But he saved my life a couple times. So
I volunteered for the Scout Dog School at Fort Benning, Georgia. And it was just by chance stepping through a doorway. An NCO was asking each of us in line, do you want to go to Scout Dog School? And quick thought, and my answer was yes. And that's how, it was as simple as that. That's how I got into the school.
What I call the Reader's Digest version, the shortened version. We had returned from temporary duty over in Okinawa to our base in Georgia, and found out that everybody was going to Vietnam, and we thought that was fine. And they sent us home on leave. We came back, we found our orders had been canceled, and that made us mad because we were 19 years old and we wanted to go. So we heard that if you were a canine handler, you were going. So we went back in and volunteered to be canine handlers. And they said, you know, you're going to go to Vietnam. We said, yeah, that's why we volunteered the last time. So anyway, they sent us to dog school, and off we went to Vietnam, just as they promised.
And went through basic training, and then went through infantry training at Fort McClendon, Alabama, which was the 2nd Tigerland. And I was just picked at random to be a dog handler.
My NCOIC sergeant in charge come up to me and says, Airman Potter, your performance reports are really good. Would you be interested in going to a new school they call Patrol Dog School? I said, yeah, you know, I love dogs. Grew up with dogs and just loved them, and had no idea what I was getting into. And next thing I know, I was on a plane going down to Lackland Air Force Base and attending the very first patrol dog school in any of the branches of service.
And when we first got there, a sergeant came in, said, started talking about radar school. Then he started talking about Scout Dog School. So he asked if, he said, radar school's closed. Does anybody want to volunteer for Scout Dog School? So I just raised my hand and said, yeah, absolutely.
History of the war dogs, you know, when we handlers found out our history in 1999, 2000, you know, it sort of developed and wanted to learn more about it. We know that when Pearl Harbor was attacked, 1941, there was not a military working dog program. That was created in March 1942. And that was the beginning of the training that evolved to where we are today.
And then in Vietnam, when they really came into action, there were roughly, during the entire war, there were approximately 4,000 dogs that were used. The majority of them were scout dogs, which mainly they walk point. They led the troops down the trails, through the jungles, and their job was to detect the enemy before they could spring an ambush. They were German Shepherds. They were sentry dogs like I had. Their dog was to detect humans by sight, by smell, by sound, and attack. They don't train them like that anymore. The handlers of today are more advanced, better trained. The dogs are better trained. I won't say better trained, they're trained differently. There's a different mission, different dog training. So, but at the end of the day, the way it boils down to where we explain it, you can't replace a man with a dog, but you can't replace a dog with a man. You put the two together, train them really well, and it's pretty hard to beat. You're not going to get biased.
We had two big things that happened in 2000. And it's kind of weird that they happened within 1 week apart. There was our National Vietnam Dog Kennel Reunion at Fort Benning, where we dedicated the War Dog Monument. There was an identical monument dedication in Riverside, California in February of that year. So there's two big things happening with dedications, just months apart. And I went to the dedication at Fort Benning. That was a situation where, you know, I arrived, had not seen another handler in 30 years, had not talked about the dogs really to anybody in all those years. But there are hundreds of people, lots of handlers, lots of media. But for me, it was just a solo event. I really didn't have the need to talk to people. That event ended, and a few days later, it was time to head to Washington for the National Vietnam Dog Handler Association reunion. And you know, they sponsored the dedication at Fort Benning that week earlier, but it wasn't a reunion, it was just a dedication event. And I arrived in Washington, again, solo event. Still had not really talked to anybody about the dogs in the war that I served in with the dog. And with me, I took my Siberian Husky Buck. I had 4 Huskies at the time. Buck was the oldest, and he, you know, done a lot of things with me with my canoeing and kayaking and wilderness trips. Prior to that trip, we spent a lot of times in the wilderness. But I went to DC with him that weekend. We went to the wall on that Friday. There was an assembly time at the wall, and you know, I'm there with my dog Buck. So I sort of wove my way through the crowd, and you know, kind of got to the wall, put him at sit, stay, stepped back, and started taking pictures with my film camera. It's 4 digital. And you know, probably took 3-4 rolls of film from various angles. So I got home, and there was several pictures after I had the film processed and saw the pictures. It was one picture of Buck looking up at the wall, you know, just kind of gazing up. And that was instantly, it was several people I shared that picture with, and you know, it had an impact on them, and they said, you need to do something with this. And I had a friend that was an artist, and within a few weeks I contacted her, and she produced some artwork related to the picture. But the picture, I've always associated everything that's happened these past 16 years, that if I had not taken the picture, you know, first you have to attend something, but if I had not taken the picture of Buck, and it had the impact it did by him just gazing up at the names, 58,000 names that are there, I don't think other ideas or decisions made would have happened without the picture. I've always assumed I would have come home and went back to work. My work job was U.S. Postal Service, and so you know, I had a good job, but went back to work and may not have reconnected or needed to talk to another veteran from that point, other than maybe a few friends you meet.
One experience I had was I was patrolling a part of the base, which Vandenberg's a very large base, where they had the movie theater. As I was walking through the parking lot, my dog alerted. In other words, he let me know that he heard something, or saw something, or smelled something. And at that particular time, he heard something. And so I followed his alert. I let him lead me over to where the alert was. Well, all of a sudden, the closer I got to this one vehicle, I heard like running water. I looked over there, and there's a siphoning hose hanging out of the gas tank, and the gas is running. It had already filled up the gas can there, and it was flowing onto the parking lot. Well, I couldn't just leave it run like that. I had to pull the hose out, and then I called it in, and continued to search the parking lot. And all of a sudden my dog's name was Raven. He jumped up on the side of the car and was looking in the window. So I look in the window, and lo and behold, there's this guy laying down the seat. Right away he admitted that what he had done. And so I arrested or contained this individual, and they come and picked him up.
One of the things that I just found, I still find fascinating, the 101st Airborne shared a portion of our base, and they had control of part of our perimeter, our distant perimeter, which is roughly 22 miles in circumference. It was a big base. And I was right at the borderline where the 101st Airborne had their men and where we were. And I was out there, and my dog went on alert, and I was going through elephant grass roughly about chest high, and I could tell by the way he was acting that it was a GI. If it was a Vietnamese out there, I couldn't hear him, but I could feel a growl come up through the leash, and that wasn't happening. So I knew I had a GI, and so I'm quietly going as quiet as I could, going through the grass, and I hear a faint, "Who's there?" And so I figured he knew it was a GI because I was coming from the base. I mean, just common sense told you that. And I identified myself, and he called me into where he was. And we sat, it was really a pretty dark night. We were about 15 feet apart, sitting in the grass. And the conversation between two GIs meeting in Vietnam always started the same. First question is, how many days do you have left? Everybody knew to the minute how many days and how many hours they had left in Vietnam. And so that went out of the way. Then where are you from? And he said, Detroit. And I said, so am I. And I said, what part? He says, northwest corner. I said, so am I. I said, where in the northwest corner? He said, Redford Township. I said, so am I. I said, where'd you go to high school? He said, Redford Union. I said, when did you graduate? He says, 1965. I graduated in 64. I said, do you know who you're talking to? He says, no. I said, it's Adams. He goes, no. And we had red lenses in our flashlights. I've turned on so you can see my face, and he did the same. And in the middle of the night, my dog takes me through elephant grass and finds the guy I went to high school with. I think that was the coolest thing ever. And that's one of my favorite stories about Andy.
These dogs were very well trained, and my dog in particular, I believe, was the best dog out of 30 dogs. I mean, every guy thinks his dog's the best dog, but he really was, because he was the hardest biter, the strongest dog, the best nose. I even took him on a 5-mile tracking job one time. We had an escaped mental patient at Base Hospital, and I tracked that guy for over 2 miles to the brush. And the track stopped at a 2-lane road, and I worked the road a ways on where it stopped, on this way and that way, then across the road, and I determined that somebody had picked that person up and took him into town. And I told my supervisor that, and that's where they found him. Somebody had picked him up in his pajamas and were right in town.
We was a team, and my job was actually to save lives, which I did in other ambushes, so we didn't walk into them. But the dogs slept with me every night, and we was an inseparable team.
When I had to leave him was like leaving your first love. You may have not had your first love, don't get in a hurry yet. But when I had to leave that dog, I cried like a baby. I actually cried for most of my dogs that I left. It really hurt. And never be afraid to show your emotions. It doesn't make you any lesser man. That's for sure.
He definitely gave me confidence, and being a dog handler, you have to have confidence in your dog. If you don't, you're going to be in trouble. And I had all the confidence in the world in that boy.
Because if you have any kind of a relationship with an animal, you realize that they're very dependent on you. And they're dependent on you for food, for shelter, for comfort. They forgive you instantly. They're always glad to see you. They accept you without, they don't care if you're good looking or bad looking. To them, they're the best looking thing in the world. Can't ask for anything better than that. And it has to make you feel better.
I've joked with a number of people through the years that God gave me a dog to protect me because I was such a young, goofy kid. And the truth is, most of us were kids over there.
It became truly a bond that I've never experienced before. And it was just, he was my buddy, and we had a lot of good times together. We had a couple times that wasn't all that great.
They are very, very forgiving. They don't hold a grudge like humans. And to you, I hate to use that word because I am a Christian, and they look at you like a God. You know, you're their love and the reason why they live. And that love and respect travels up and down the leash.
I mean, this was substantially a long time after I had left. There was no question. Andy had been dead for a long time, and it was still like somebody kicked me right in the chest. I was really surprised by that. You know, I really was. I mean, of course the dog's dead. Well, it's one thing to accept it, it's another thing to hear how, and it's official. He's really gone. So.
It was a sad ending to their legacy. To be destroyed like that as surplus equipment. It hit every dog handler. It was a punch in the gut and a stab in the heart.
I'm fortunate that my chef lived to be 10 years old. I was able to get in touch with the last handler that had him, who happens to live in Seguin, Texas, and he advised me that Shep became very sick, and he was put down for humane reasons, not because he was an extra piece of equipment. So he was fortunate. He was 10 years old.
Broke my heart. I had 2 dogs that I had in the military. One of them was Gretchen. I found out about 8 years ago that she was one of the 204 dogs that got to come home, and I was thrilled to find that out. But Artis was killed in Vietnam, so knowing what happened to both my dogs gives me peace of mind.
My Shep here is my service dog. He can tell when my sugar bounces. I'm a type 2 diabetic. Thank you to the herbicides that they used over there. I have not only the adrenaline thing, I have some issues with some PTSD from other things that happened over there that were not just the other. And if I get into heated discussion, we'll call it, he will get between me and the person I'm having that discussion and back me away. And when I'm down, he's always there. And he sleeps by my bed every night, or on my bed, with me and my wife. He goes everywhere. The truck I'm driving here is his truck. So when I open the door, he's in the truck.
On one hand, I truly love what I do. I love to bring knowledge to the people and be able to tell them a little bit about the dogs. But on the other hand, I absolutely hate it. It just takes me back to the bad times, and I want to remember the good times.